One crisp morning in suburban Atlanta, I'm sipping my coffee when I spot her Karen, the self-titled ruler of our little Roswell neighborhood. She's standing at the edge of my yard, her face brighter than a Georgia peach, hollering louder than a siren at a Bulldogs game. But wait, it gets better. Her glossy new luxury SUV is stuck, sitting helpless in the middle of a giant trench I dug around my driveway, complete with a working drawbridge I could lift and drop whenever I pleased. Rewind 2 weeks, and this would have sounded like a fever dream. How'd we end up here? You're gonna love this tale. Hey, if you're tuning in, drop a comment below. Ever had an HOA tyrant like Karen in your neck of the woods? I can't be the only one. So, picture me, Jake Miller, just a regular dude in a quiet corner of Marietta. All I wanted was to fire up the grill for some ribs on a Saturday, kick back, and enjoy life. But peace? Not a chance with Karen running our homeowners association like she was the mayor of Buckhead. She'd eyeball your lawn like a hawk, slap you with a fine if your porch wasn't the perfect Savannah beige, and mail you nastygrams if your truck had a smudge of dirt from a Peachtree Street drive. I'd put up with her antics before, but I never thought it'd turn into a full-on showdown. It all kicked off one day when I stepped outside, coffee mug steaming, and saw Karen's jumbo SUV parked right across my driveway. At first, I figured she'd pulled in for a quick stop, maybe a detour from Alpharetta traffic. But then I saw her on the sidewalk, arms folded, sporting that cocky grin she saved for when she was about to ruin someone's day. "Morning, Karen," I said, keeping it polite. "Your car's blocking my driveway." She flashed a smile sweeter than a Coke from the varsity and said, "Oh, I know, Jake. It's HOA stuff. We've got reports about your driveway." "Reports? From who?" "That's hush-hush," she replied, brushing me off like I was a fly at a Lake Lanier picnic. "It's not up to our rules, so my car's staying put till we sort it." I glanced at my driveway. Just a basic concrete patch, nothing flashy, nothing wrong. "That's crazy," I said. "It's fine." Karen peeked at her nails and shrugged. "Sorry, Jake, the HOA board decides. Until we look it over, my SUV's here to stop any trouble." I waited for her to crack a joke. "Nope." She grabbed her clipboard, scribbled a note, and added, "Oh, and towing it? That's a no-no. HOA says it's harassment." I wanted to shout, to lose it, but Karen lived for drama. She'd turn any outburst into more fines. So I took a slow breath, gave a nod, and headed back inside. She thought she'd won, but she just poked the wrong bear. The next few days were a nightmare straight out of a Decatur traffic jam. Every morning, Karen's SUV sat there, hogging my driveway like it owned the place. I called the HOA, no dice. I rang a tow company. They wouldn't budge, muttering about some vague neighborhood pact. Karen strutted around like she'd just won a lottery down in Macon, acting like my yard was hers. Then the fines hit. They claimed I was skipping driveway upkeep because I couldn't use it with her car in the way. Every trip to the mailbox brought a new bill from the HOA, demanding cash for nonsense. It drove me up the wall, but I wasn't about to cave. If Karen wanted to push me, I'd push back, smarter. So, I got to work. I spent nights digging through zoning laws, flipping pages like I was cramming for a test at Georgia Tech. Then I hit gold, a little rule saying I could add safety upgrades to my property if they weren't permanent. I checked it twice, 3 times, even called my buddy Tom, a lawyer in Sandy Springs, to make sure it held water. It did. That's when the fun started. I rented an excavator, hired some guys from a crew in Kennesaw, and said, "Dig me a wide trench around my driveway, like a moat around a Charleston fort." They thought I'd lost it, but a few bucks changed their tune. By sundown, my driveway was circled by a 4-foot-deep ditch no car could cross. The next morning, Karen marched over, ready to brag, but when she saw her SUV trapped in my trench, her smug look melted into pure shock. "What in the world is this?" she yelled. "Just a safety upgrade," I said, biting back a laugh. "HOA rules let me." Her eye twitched. "You can't dig a pit around my car." "Oh, I can," I shot back. I looked Karen dead in the eye and said, "This is my yard, and since you wouldn't budge, I had to work around you." She stared at me like her brain just hit a dead end on I-85 in downtown Atlanta. You can't do this. It's against the law," she sputtered. "Nope," I replied, pulling out a copy of the zoning rules I'd printed. "It's all legal. I even got a permit stamped by the city of Decatur." Karen's jaw locked up tighter than a vault in a Savannah bank. "You'll pay for this," she hissed. "The HOA won't stand for it." I shrugged. "We'll see about that." I strolled back inside, leaving her steaming on my lawn. But here's the kicker. I wasn't finished. The trench was just step one. Karen had no idea I was about to drop a bigger surprise. The next morning, I jolted awake to loud pounding on my door. Sounded like someone was trying to break it down in a Buckhead condo raid. I didn't need to guess who it was. Sure enough, there stood Karen, looking like she'd spent all night cooking up a plan to ruin me. Her face was red as a sunset over Lake Lanier, fists balled up, and the second I opened the door, she poked a manicured finger right into my chest. "Fill that ditch in now," she barked. I sipped my coffee slow, loving how I twitched at my calm. "You mean my trench?" "Sorry, can't. It's a legal safety fix." She let out a noise like a ticked-off coyote in the North Georgia hills. "You've got 24 hours to fix this, or the HOA will fine you into next year." I tilted my head, pretending to mull it over. "Funny you say that, 'cause I've got some upgrades coming." Her eyes narrowed. "What upgrades?" I grinned wide. "A drawbridge." Her jaw dropped, then snapped shut, then dropped again, like a fish flopping on a dock in Tybee Island. "A drawbridge? In a neighborhood? You've lost it." "Nope," I said. "I checked the rules. If it's temporary, not a fixed gate, I'm good. Plus, it'll keep my driveway safe, your big worry, right?" Karen looked ready to chuck her clipboard at me, but instead, she stormed off, muttering about calling inspectors from Alpharetta and dragging me to court. I wasn't fazed. She could try all she wanted. I'd done my research, and for once, I was pumped for this fight. Over the next few days, I rounded up supplies and hired some pros from Marietta. Didn't need anything wild, just solid wood, tough hinges, and a pulley setup from a shop in Kennesaw. I filmed every bit of it, partly to prove I was legit, but mostly 'cause I knew this blow up online. Karen didn't sit still either. She dialed up city folks from Roswell to shut me down, but they just shrugged when they saw my permits checked out. She tried rallying neighbors with a petition, but most of them were fed up with her antics too. She even blocked my cruise trucks once, but that flopped when one guy turned out to be kin to a councilman in Sandy Springs. By the time my drawbridge was up, the whole street was buzzing. It was a beaut, strong planks hooked to a pulley I could yank to lift it, locking my driveway tight. I tested it out, tugging the rope and grinning as it rose, leaving no way in. Karen flipped out. "This is nuts," she yelled from her porch. "You can't have a fortress in a suburb." "Not a fortress," I called back. "A safety feature. HOA loves those, right?" She made a choked sound and stomped off. I thought that'd be it. Wrong move. That night, I woke to rustling outside my window in the quiet of Peachtree Corners. I peeked through the blinds and caught Karen sneaking around my trench with a flashlight, eyeballing my drawbridge like she was plotting to wreck it. I snatched my phone and hit record. "Looking for something, Karen?" I shouted. She spun around, nearly tripping into the ditch. "Just checking this silly thing's not dangerous," she snapped. "You mean snooping?" I said. "Looks like trespassing to me." She glared but tried to play it cool. "I'm HOA board. I can check violations." "Funny," I shot back. "Last I checked, this ain't HOA land. Don't worry, though. This video's going to my lawyer. Might even share it with the folks online. Trust me, the internet would lose its mind over this. Our HOA boss sneaking around my yard in the dead of night," I said, holding up my phone with a smirk. Karen's face turned paler than a winter fog in the Smoky Mountains, and without a word, she spun around and hightailed it back to her place like she'd just seen a ghost tour gone wrong in Savannah. By morning, our little Sewanee neighborhood was buzzing like a hornet's nest after a kid poked it with a stick. Word of Karen's midnight creeping raced through the streets faster than rumors at a 4th of July cookout in Peachtree City, and folks were done with her games. She tried to play it off, insisting she was just doing her job, but the neighbors weren't swallowing that load of bunk. Meanwhile, my story was blowing up online. My trench and drawbridge video went viral, racking up likes from Athens to Augusta, with thousands of strangers rooting for me, calling me a hero against HOA bullies. Karen must have felt the ground slipping out from under her in Roswell, 'cause she switched gears fast. If she couldn't win with rules, she'd turn my life into a living nightmare another way. The fines hit like a hailstorm in North Georgia, dumb ones like unapproved yard tweaks and eyesore addition. She even sweet-talked her last few HOA pals from Marietta into filing noise complaints, claiming my quiet trench was somehow blaring like a jukebox. Construction had been over for days. My blood boiled, but I wasn't about to let her see me sweat. I'd been sneaky, collecting proof of her dirty tricks, papers showing she'd swiped HOA cash for fancy getaways to Tybee Island. It was easy pickings. She was a hawk with her ruler on your lawn, but a mess with her own books in Alpharetta. I stacked it all in a neat folder, my secret weapon, just waiting for the right second to unleash it. That second came at an emergency HOA meeting Karen called in Kennesaw, her last shot to crush my violations. I walked in, heart pounding like I'd just run a 5K in Atlanta heat, and saw her at the table's head, grinning like she'd hit the jackpot in Macon. "We've ruled your setups against our codes," she crowed. "Tear it down now, or we'll drag you to court." I flashed a slow smile, slid my folder forward, and said, "That's cute, 'cause I've got some rule breaking of yours to talk about." Her grin vanished like a light switch flipped off. "What are you yapping about?" she snapped, voice tight. I opened my folder and let it rip. Phony fines, HOA funds blown on her spa days in Sandy Springs, bullying folks across Duluth. With every word, she shrank, her face draining like she'd seen a twister bearing down on Lake Lanier. "That's all lies," she snarled, but it sounded weak, desperate. "I've got the receipts," I said, cool as a breeze in Savannah, happy to share him with the cops. The room went still as a graveyard in Dahlonega. My heart thumped, but I held steady. The board members, who'd always shrunk under her glare, sat up straight, eyes locked on me. In a flash, they voted her out as HOA pres, every hand up, no hesitation. By Friday, cops in Decatur were digging into her crooked deals. That night, I leaned on my porch rail, sipping an ice-cold Coke, watching her SUV get towed off by the law, not me lifting a finger. What started as a wild idea with my trench and drawbridge had torn her mask right off. My driveway? Never looked sharper. Karen went quiet for days after that meeting, and it spooked me, like the eerie hush before a storm slams St. Simon's. She wasn't the type to slink off licking her wounds. I could feel her plotting in Johns Creek, gears grinding for revenge. The neighborhood was electric. Like after a big win at Georgia Tech, folks hailed me as their champ. Every time I stepped out, someone honked from a pickup, tossed me a grin, or begged to see my drawbridge lift. Even the mail guy in Norcross cracked up, saying, "You're a legend, man." But my gut churned. I knew Karen wasn't finished breaking my spirit. Sure enough, the chaos crept in slow. First, some nameless snitch tipped off Dunwoody about unlicensed building. A zoning guy rolled up, half laughing at my drawbridge, half grumbling about the call. He checked my permits, tipped his cap, and split, clean as a whistle. Then fake complaints poured in. Neighbors swearing I was blasting music at midnight in Tucker, acting shady, even saying my trench might crack houses like an earthquake in Chattanooga. My fists clenched. I could practically hear Karen cackling from her porch. Every petty jab fueled my fire. She was clawing to drag me down, and I wasn't about to let her win. Online, folks from coming to Columbus dubbed me the Trench Titan, comments piling up like leaves in fall. The neighborhood held its breath, waiting for her next swing, and I stood tall, ready to flip her schemes right back in her face. This was war, and I was just getting warmed up in Georgia's suburbs. I knew Karen was behind those petty complaints, like a shadow stirring trouble and coming, but without hard proof, it was just her latest jab to wear me down. Then she cranked it up a notch. One night, a loud bang jolted me awake in my Roswell home, my heart hammering like a drum at a Georgia Bulldogs game. I bolted to the window, peering into the dark. Nothing at first, but when I flipped on the porch lights, my gut sank like a stone in Lake Lanier. Someone had sliced the ropes on my drawbridge. It slumped halfway into the trench, planks splintered from the fall. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking with fury, and checked my security feed. There she was, Karen, decked out in black like a wannabe spy from a cheap Savannah thriller, clutching bolt cutters. She'd climbed into my ditch and hacked it herself. I didn't think twice. I dialed the cops. By the time they rolled up to my Duluth Street, Karen had scurried back to her lair, but my footage was gold. The officers banged on her door, and after a tense standoff, me pacing, adrenaline pumping, she stumbled out, yelling she was the victim here, harassed and framed. She tried spinning it, claiming she was saving the neighborhood from my trench, but the cops weren't biting. They cuffed her for sneaking in and wrecking my stuff, and watching her get shoved into a cruiser felt sweeter than a peach cobbler from a Marietta diner. The next day, our little Tucker corner erupted. Folks couldn't stop talking. Turns out Karen had been rubbing people raw for years, from Johns Creek to Norcross, but nobody dared poke the bear till I did. Some neighbors confessed they'd dreamed of fighting back but feared her wrath. Now, with her caught red-handed, the HOA board in Kennesaw had to act. They called a snap vote and booted her out for good. Every hand shot up. No debate. But the storm wasn't over. A few days later, my inbox pinged. An investigator from Decatur, sniffing around HOA fraud, wanted to chat about my folder from the meeting. I handed it all over, every crooked fine she'd slapped on me, Every dollar she'd siphoned for trips to Tybee Island or fancy buys in Buckhead. Within a week, it blew up into a full-on legal mess. Karen wasn't just a nosy control freak. She was a straight-up crook, skimming HOA cash for years to fund beach getaways, shiny toys, and even some sketchy account off in the Caymans. When the news hit, our shambling neighbors went wild. Folks who'd once ducked her glare now laughed in her face. Some hung "free at last" signs on their porches like it was a holiday in Athens. Her house went up for sale fast, but it sat there, unwanted, like a stale biscuit in Sandy Springs. No one wanted the ex-queen's castle. She finally sold it cheap and bailed, and the day she left, I stood by my trench, coffee in hand, watching her load a moving van. She shot me a glare, but it was empty. She'd lost everything. I raised my mug in a quiet cheer as she drove off. With Karen gone, the HOA in Peachtree Corners fell apart. Most bored folks quit, and we all voted to ditch it entirely. Turns out, life was better without it. No more goofy rules, no fines, no tiptoeing around. For the first time in ages, our street felt like a breath of fresh air off Street Simons. Me? I turned into a local star. My trenchant Drawbridge story spread past Duluth. News crews from Atlanta picked it up, and soon I was chatting on air about my big stand. The videos went nuts online, and folks from all over, California to Carolina, sent letters asking how to tackle their own HOA woes. I fixed the Drawbridge, and it stuck around. Kids in Sewanee started calling my place Fort Jake, giggling as I raised it for them. I even bolted a little sign by the trench, "To HOA chaos, good riddance." It sparked chats at every barbecue. One night, as I grilled burgers in my backyard, an older neighbor from Dunwoody swung by. He'd lived here forever, watched Karen's reign from day one. "You know," he said, eyeing the sunset over our calm little Lawrenceville slice, "I always figured someone knock her down someday. Never thought it'd be with a ditch and a bridge, though." I chuckled, flipping a patty, the smoky smell mixing with victory. "Sometimes you gotta think outside the box." He grinned, tipping his cap. "Well, it worked. Place feels right without her." I nodded, the warmth of home sinking in. "Yeah, it does." For the first time since I'd landed here, I wasn't just living, I was thriving. Write in the comments, how would you act in such a situation with HOA? Subscribe to the channel. I have many unique stories about disputes with HOA.